Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Jackie Van Ham. Welcome back to another episode of On the Throttle with Jackie and my good buddy over there, Mr. Josh. On today's show, we've got a couple of really exciting topics away. In the woods, we're going to talk a little bit about the passing of legendary American iconic racer Wes Cooley. I'm also going to touch a little bit on an awesome racing event that you might not be familiar with, a really cool event called Moto Beach Classic that I am just returning home from, and then a little bit of news on the back end of that from our friends over at Royal Enfield. What do you got going on today, Josh?
So there's actually some really good stuff on my end too. So El Diablo's the champion due to Ducati chucking it at the scenery. But in my second topic, we're going to cover how it wasn't all bad in terms of the news this week for the pasta burners. So let's get into it. What do you got?
So first things out of the gate, a little bit of sad news coming our way. Wes Cooley, again, iconic, legendary American racer, passed away very, very recently, just in the last week or so. This was all over the news. I know for years, especially being into vintage motorcycles, I have a lot of friends that ride Suzuki, love Suzuki. There is an iconic blue and white paint scheme. I've got a handful of buddies that have done their paint up in this paint scheme, and Wes Cooley may be one of the quieter players in the American road racing scene in the 1970s and 80s, but definitely still very, very important. Wes Cooley, better known as Wes, was an American former motorcycle road racer and AMA Superbike 1979 1980 AMA Superbike Championship on a Yoshimura Suzuki 1000 GS 1000S. He was born in LA. He was born to a racing family. He did start racing younger in his life with Kawasaki, actually, that I didn't know about. His Yoshimura switched to better handling Suzuki bikes, and Cooley began winning more regularly. His big claim to fame, how he's known possibly the best, was he teamed up with Mike Baldwin to win the prestigious Suzuka 8 Hours race of Japan. And then Cooley went on to win his first Superbike National Championship in 1979, and he successfully defended his crown in 1980 by fighting off future Hall of Famers Eddie Lawson aboard a Kawasaki, another huge American racing name, and of course, Freddie Spencer aboard a Honda. So these are just some names from iconic, legendary road racing time in American history aboard that Suzuki. But folks might not know is not only was he super fast and competitive out on the track, he ended up having to step away from racing shortly after due to this horrific accident at Sears Raceway. Because of that horrific accident, he survived. He ended up going through a long recovery, but because of that, not only was he not going to continue racing anymore, but it made him completely change life paths because then he decided to get into kind of like passing along what had happened to him in his healing path, and he became a nurse. He actually went into the medical field after that and started taking care of others. So not only was he just an incredibly known for being a funny and kind and gentle and generous racer, but also and super well known and beloved. But then he went on to have this great career in nursing, which I think is really incredibly interesting. So had a great life and was a great man and a great human being. I got some great slides up on the screen right now. That is him three up on a bicycle that is in Japan. The rider in the middle is famous, legendary David Aldana, who Josh and I have had the fortune of meeting out at AMA Mid Ohio. So I
Yeah.
wanted to just put those pictures up there. But this comes from the same era of just massive names, right? Freddie Spencer and and Wes Cooley and Eddie Lawson, all these huge names. So it was sad news of a great man and a legend in American road racing.
What's so interesting about that time, and I mean, every period has this thing where we all go back and revisit it. And I mean, of course, there's always the heyday always moves, you know what I mean? So it's that was the late 70s, early 80s was the heyday. In another 5-6 years, the mid 80s is going to be the heyday, because that's looking back at history. What was so cool and so interesting about those bikes and that setup and just that time that is when motorcycles, the engine technology got so far ahead of the brake technology and chassis technology. Formula One race cars went through the same thing. I mean, every type of racing kind of goes through that evolution at some point. And what's so interesting about it is those guys didn't have the same training. They didn't have the same mindset of today's modern racers, where it's total devotion just to that one thing for training. These guys had lives. And what's so cool about that is that they were still able to handle these types of machines. I mean, one of my personal favorite bikes that I've had in the past, I had an old Kawasaki H1. I mean, it was the most ridiculous machine I've ever owned, ever ridden, because it was 75, 80 horsepower and had brakes that may as well have been on my kid's tricycle. So these guys in this era makes, it kind of adds to that cool factor and that whole nostalgia factor of it. And it's one of the things that I love about it. The other thing is too, is the fact that these guys rode these motorcycles at Suzuka for 8 hours, obviously split with team, but still any amount of time on one of those bikes and handling one of those bikes is just absolutely insane. It's just a
Wes
testament.
Cooley. Yeah, Wes is was beloved globally, and but was particularly beloved over in Japan for that exact reason, because he was such a hero and put on this dominating performance at Suzuka that to up until the end of his life he was considered quite a legend in Japan. He most recently, in the last handful of years, he of course was inducted into the Hall of Fame, of course, and then has been a grand marshal at several prominent events here in the as well. I remember seeing a great photo of him with this. I mean, we showed a picture just a second ago of him in his younger days with that huge smile, and he just was that guy. You know, he just was always friendly. Everybody loved him. Always had a smile on his face, but was a fierce competitor. You know, a little bit of like Nicky Hayden vibes for me. Everybody in the paddock was his friend, and that was cool, great American racer. And so I just wanted to give him a little bit of a tribute at the very beginning of today's show. And speaking of great race, holy smokes, you have got some great coverage and things to talk about for MotoGP. It was a bonkers race this past weekend in Rimini, if I remember correctly, over in Italy. One of the last races, if not the last race, that Valentino Rossi also will be racing before his retirement that he announced this season, that will be happening in Italy as well. So, man, the drama, the emotion, just a total pure. I laughed and cried. It was better than cats. It was everything going on. Talk to us about this awesome race for MotoGP.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, it was one of those things. First off, spoiler alert: if you haven't watched it, you just need to watch our show here still and continue and suffer through this, because if you go back and even knowing what happens in this race, the drama that's there is still just amazing. And this to me is why it doesn't matter if it's MotoGP, it doesn't matter if it's a bunch of 8-year-olds on a dirt track somewhere. This is why we all love racing, and this is the drama that's behind it. So, to like what Jacqui said, Valentino's last race on his home soil as MotoGP, I'm sure Valentino Rossi is not just going to get out of racing completely. Guys like that, it's what they do. Especially with his VR46 team, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, he's going to be around here. But still an emotional thing from that. So then, with it being an Italian race, Ducati, obviously, they want to do well on their home soil. Watching Bagnaia and Miller take off on the start, everything looked just beautiful for Ducati. Now, they went with an interesting tire choice. They went with a hard front. And even the announcer said that up front. They're like, they're going to need to be careful on that. Turn 15.
Foreshadowing alert.
yeah. And I mean, this is, they were talking about this even at kind of like lap 3 or 4. Hey, Ducati picked the hard front, which is an interesting choice. And hey, whatever David A. Tardazzi said about that, hey, it's the choice they went with. So turn 15, I believe it was, you see Mr. Miller just low sides on the way in, and you think, oh, that sucks. So, I mean, still really good racing. So it kept Bagnaia. He was in first. Quartararo was, I mean, mid-pack at that point. I mean, 13th, 14th. That makes the championship interesting. 5 laps to go. Bagnaia literally loses the front within, what would you say, Jackie, 100 feet of where Miller did?
Oh, I thought it was darn near the same corner, and I just glanced at the wide shot. It was, I mean, it's right around. It's either the same corner or one or two, like in like right next door to it. Because I think you're right. I think it was like
Yeah.
somewhere in 13, 14, 15 at
Yep.
Rimini, where there's like a pretty nasty turn they talk about throughout the entire race during the bridge. It's a notorious corner. Everybody knows to kind of pick their way through it. And these two bikes, these two Ducatis, I'm not going to say same bike because you and I both know that they are set up differently for each racer, but let's say same bike. Same
Yes.
bike. They both chose hard front tire, which means it's going to have more longevity through the duration of the race, but it's not going to necessarily have as much grip as going with a medium tire, which is I think what everybody else chose. So just an interesting choice. And this bike that already is a total handful and has proven that it will bite you at any moment if you're not like absolutely carefully handling it. She just absolutely spit both of them out near her, and then Ducati's hopes were dashed for the home GP. Now there's still 2 or 3 races left, and then also it did clinch who was going to be the champion for the season.
Yep, and that is El Diablo himself, Quartararo. Now, the interesting thing about that, he is the first French MotoGP championship. So it was interesting. He ended up all the way up to third, just from a number of guys tossing it. He ended all the way up to third. It came down last lap. He got passed. Boy, what a great way to celebrate the championship if he would have been on the podium. But from you seeing these pictures here, he looks pretty happy about having that championship there. I mean, the celebration was great. I mean, he's out there dancing on the track, the dueling burnout. I mean, the whole 9 yards. This too, with the ups and downs that he has had over the past season and a half, well earned. I don't know if this is the start of the next dynasty, so to say, because you remember how Valentino dominated. You remember that. I mean, when you look at the past, I even remember the days of Mick Doohan. I mean, you see those groups. Is this the start of that? Well, we'll have to see. But this, to me, like I said, it doesn't matter if it's MotoGP. It doesn't matter if it's 6-year-olds or 8-year-olds on a dirt track on 50cc bikes. This is the type of drama that makes us love racing, just of any sort. And this is why we watch it. To me, it was just a treat.
I'm just going to selfishly say, at least it's not Marc Marquez again. Man, enough already.
Yeah.
We get it. We get it. You're amazing. I joke, I kid. He is an outstanding racer, clearly incredibly talented, but has had just like a series of unfortunate accidents and unfortunate events and keeps getting these injuries. You know, it started out in 2020 and it's just kind of been snowballing. He did race this season, obviously, but just couldn't quite stay fit enough to stay in the game the entire season and put up the effort that he needed to. So huge congratulations, Fabio Quartararo. Congratulations to him. First French MotoGP winner. I also find just incredibly shocking. That seems really strange to me, that is the very first French MotoGP winner in the history of the Grand Prix. But if you have not checked out that race, make sure you go click on over the internet and go check it out. It was absolutely outstanding. And you got more news from Ducati, Josh, right?
I do. So that, like I said, it wasn't all bad news this week for all the pasta burners. Being a bit of an Italian bike aficionado myself, I was really interested to see that Ducati is now going to be the motorcycle manufacturer for the MotoE World Cup. Now, currently, that's a series that the bikes are set up by Energica, which, I mean, beautiful bikes, very cool. They are, I mean, they truly are super bikes, and the acceleration out of those is, I mean, they will match darn near anything out on the road. Um, if you're ever looking for a good example of those, Nico Rosberg, a former Formula One champion, got one of the first Energicas, and his review on that is pretty entertaining and pretty good with that. What I find so odd about this, and what I think it makes it kind of newsworthy, is Ducati currently does not have any electric motorcycles. I believe they may have an e-bike or two out there, but they don't have an electric superbike of any sorts. So to me, what's going to be interesting about this starts in, if I remember with my notes, it's 2023 on. What's your thoughts on this, Jacqui? So what's Ducati's game plan here?
Well, I mean, you're right. I have not, out of all of the major OEM manufacturers, everybody's got the e-bike bug, right? Everybody's cranking out e-bikes. It's the buzz, pun intended. Everybody's chatting about it. And the one company that's been pretty tight-lipped about e-bikes and is very traditional, performance, combustion engine, sexy Italian design would be Ducati. And I have not heard a single whisper about them going into the e-bike game, and then all of a sudden this bombshell drops that they are going to be not only getting into the e-bike game, but they're competing at top premium level Moto E racing. And there's not even a design, a prototype. There's nothing laying around, and they got to get their act together because they're already scheduled for 2023 season, which is only just over 1 year away. So I am really curious about this secret that they must be holding on to in Bologna, like the best secret they've because I haven't heard a single peep about it. And I like to think I kind of have my finger on the pulse. Again, another e-bike joke. I like to think I have got my finger on the pulse pretty good, but I haven't seen a single thing about it. Just totally
That's
shocked.
what's kind of that's what's kind of surprising to me also, is because, I mean, I know Yamaha's huge into the e-bike space. Batteries, electric motors, they are a completely different beast. Now, granted, I love a lot of the stuff about electric bikes, e-bikes, things of that nature, just because of the fact when you look at traction control, when you look at engine management, there's so many things that have to be controlled with an internal combustion engine to get it to do what we can do with them. When you look at traction control, when you look at other items like that right now, with an e-bike, I mean, more electrons, less electrons. It's kind of that easy. Now, the problem is right. Getting that to work so you can get the energy out of the battery, so you don't overheat the battery, so you don't overheat the motor. Heat is such a huge issue with electrics. Those types of things are big engineering challenges. And Ducati, don't get me wrong, Ducati's not a backyard builder. In the same sense, the engineering departments that are required to do stuff like this, to me, I would imagine a Yamaha, a Honda. When you imagine the size of those companies, those are the ones where I think, they're going to tackle this problem. This is big stuff. For Ducati to come along, I don't want to say as a boutique manufacturer, but Ducati to come along, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. So,
for sure.
So agreed. So the major Asian manufacturers, the major Japanese manufacturers, make sense because battery tech is literally in their backyard. It's what they do. It might not be literally what they do in their factory, but the neighboring factory probably has something to do with it. So it makes sense for Asian manufacturers, in my mind, to be way into this e-bicycle and e-bike motorcycle platform technology, especially because it's dominated right now by Asia market. And the city centers that do not allow combustion, period, full stop. It has to be battery operated. So it does make sense for me, but I was going to say the exact same thing. So I don't remember any Italian battery manufacturers at the top of my list. I could be wrong. I'm sure that there are, so don't eat me alive in the comments out there, internet. But what I really think is also interesting is, are they going to pull the move where they end up just buying somebody's intellectual property and just slapping a Ducati label on it and calling it a Ducati? Are they going to be buying a piece of Energica, which is another Italian brand, and going forward into the e-bike game and just kind of partnering up? I think we're going to have to wait and see, but I'm definitely super curious to how this story is going to shake out. And if the secret of the century is the fact that they've been, secretly building this, legendary e-bike that no one's ever heard of or seen to date.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it, even when you talk about like some of the, I mean, with the videos that they've had releasing new models and stuff like that. Obviously, their R&D and development has been busy. Their engineering has been busy. These are not guys. I mean, Ducati's also not a group of guys that sits back and rests on their laurels. They're constantly pushing. So where are they going to find the time, the people, the energy, the capital to do all of this? That to me is the big thing. I am super excited to see what they come up with, because let's face it, they typically don't do flops. They just don't work that way. So that to me is, I mean, it's going to be exciting to see. Now, the one thing that I will say with it is that Ducati always has is Ducati is always very Italian. It's not, they do what they're designed to do unbelievably well. I still remember the first time I hopped on a 916. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then about 20 miles later, I had to make the phone call. Hey, can you come pick me up? It's not running right. So there is character to them, but they do exactly what they're supposed to do unbelievably well. And it's that character that makes them Italian bikes, and that's why we love them.
Yeah, so I don't know the nuts and bolts of it. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I'm definitely excited to see what's going to be coming from the folks at Ducati as far as an e-bike motorcycle platform. And then again, maybe they're going to open to the family and their parent company, which is a huge automotive industry, and maybe they're going to steal a little bit of that technology. Who knows? So we're all going to have to wait and see and stay on top of this story and see what is coming. But speaking of what is coming, how about what is happening for me? Woo! I've been everywhere. In case you're wondering where,
you look tan, Jacqui. Let's hear the reason behind this.
I don't know if I'm coming or going, because right now I'm actually at the Atlanta airport. I got off my plane and I just set up a little camp here so we could do our show today. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. All of our fans that are watching live, thank you so much for clicking, liking, and sharing all of these videos. You can always check out all of our On the Throttle shows over at our MPN Motorcycle Powersports News Facebook page or our YouTube page as well. Some of our back episodes. We are officially on episode 4, my friend. But anywho, so I'm in Atlanta. I'm just returning from a whirlwind motorcycle, like, top 10 bucket list weekend. I was out with our team, our Motorcycle Powersports News team, out in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, shooting at a place called Wheels Through Time, and we will have awesome episodes of that. And then I jumped on a flight and went out to Los Angeles to go and work at and announce and talk to people and announce the racing that happened at Moto Beach Classic. So Moto Beach Classic is this great event. This is the 4th, I'm going to say annual, even though 2020 things got canceled, but 4th annual event for Roland Sands Design and Indian Motorcycle, who co-founded this super hooligan titled race series 4 or 5 years ago. And the point of this super hooligan race series versus hooligan racing, which is gaining popularity all over the US and globally, Super Hooligan was their own trademark name to reference that it was going to be more Indian motorcycle heavy. They even had like a mini team, and they had sponsored riders and all sorts of rad stuff. As the program has progressed, other manufacturers have jumped in on the action, jumped in on the fun, and now there's a little bit of everything. There still is plenty of Indian motorcycle out there on the track. There's plenty of Harley-Davidson Sportster. I also saw several really, really fantastic KTMs. And actually, this season, the grand champion, who is a gentleman named Scooter Vernon. That's right, Josh. Scooter Vernon was the winner, and he was aboard an absolutely beautiful KTM. Number 2 for the season was a name that you might be familiar with, Andy DeBrino, who is an American road racer, and he races dirt and does all sorts of rad stuff. He's always got his hand into something fun. He does jump in and has for several years jumped in with the Super Hooligan Race Series. He is a previous Grand National Champion with them. I believe he even won, if I remember right, the first year they gave away one of the flat track bikes, one of the Indian Motorcycle real deal FTR 750s, like the $50,000 flat track race machine that they go race pro level flat track racing with. I believe he took one of those home the first year. But this year, and I believe that last year as well, he's been aboard a KTM and has done really, really well. So third place was a gentleman named AJ Kirkpatrick, who AJ Kirkpatrick also has a big history in American racing. Road racing, I think he races sprint cars. He does like everything. He races everything. And he is definitely a professional racer because they let everybody come and bang bars. There's pros, there's some like washed up stunt dudes, there's young guys, there's older guys, there's guys that own companies, customers, there's a little everything. It's quite a scene. It's always just a super, super good time. Again, Moto Beach Classic was this past weekend out in Southern California, part of this Quattro series that went on this season, meaning 4 different stops. The very first stop, which I think is also really interesting because they made sure to kind of tie it in with the really high profile American racing that's going on right now. And the very first stop was at Laguna Seca as part of the Moto America and King of the Baggers racing that happened out there, which Josh, I know you're a huge fan of. So it was hooligan racing on the track, and they had their own hooligan race series going, this Super Hooligan Race Series. Those bikes also went out and raced the corkscrew. So it was just like a bonanza at Laguna Seca. It was like the serious, real road racers competing for Moto America, and then just like totally wide open, buck wild, twin cylinder, huge displacement, heavy, not meant to race, some with bags, just ridiculous racing. But all this being said, it's terrifically exciting because it's super inappropriate. It's pretty dangerous, always a hand grenade waiting to happen. And then the folks at Laguna Seca for this year, I had the chance of being there the following weekend, and the director of Laguna Seca was even saying they have not seen a crowd that big in years. MotoGP here was full of Harley Davidson touring bikes and cruisers in the parking lot. So have your opinion about whether it's real racing or it's not real racing, or it's taking racing seriously or it's not taking racing seriously. At the end of the day, it's bringing people who are not normally paying attention to American premier level road racing, traditional road racing. It's bringing them to these events and potentially turning them to American race fans. And that I am super, super excited about. So that's what went on this weekend for me. It was a super good time. Josh, what do you think about all that, other than the fact that you think it's super inappropriate and it's not real racing?
No, I do. It's funny. So to me, like, I mean, we talked about before the show, the day that the second motorcycle came into existence was the day of the first race.
Yes.
So I mean, to me, there's the whole thing with that, and there is your traditional racing that is the strict rules. It is the it is the doing their best to make things the most competitive as possible. And it's all about going fast at that point. In the same sense, there's all sorts of like the hooligan races and the bagger races and the stuff like that. I think those are great because, as you said, they're bringing a whole different audience to racing that may not care otherwise. I'm more of a traditionalist when it comes to stuff like that. I care about, hey, he was 6 inches later on his apex that lap. That's why he's 100th of a second slower. Those are the things that I look at and compare with. There is I guess I would say more, I mean, we've admitted that we're very different. There's more your crowd. It's people that just want to go fast and make loud noises and have fun doing it. And
yes,
so, I mean, totally opposite ends of the spectrum. It's why we've got this show. It's why we interact so well with this show. If it gets more people there, I am all for it just because of the
Yeah.
fact it really does. The only reason why we're able to race is because people are willing to spend money in sponsoring it. And I mean, if we don't
And
get
that
that,
means
then we don't
eyeballs,
have
my
a
friend. That means people gotta
right.
come.
Right. And if we
Yep.
don't get that, we don't get those high level of racing. We don't get any of it. So to me, this is
I think there's
exactly what I
I
like to
think there's
see.
a yeah, I think there's a place for all of this racing. And just to wrap this show up and put a final pin on it, not only was that a great race for the big kids, but this also was a super cool race. They had two different levels of Stasic, those little e-bicycle balance bikes racing.
Yep.
Okay, now look, these little tiny, tiny, tiny kids racing these bikes. There was dozens of them. Parents brought their kids from all over the place to come racing. So another super exciting opportunity of making new racers, literally making new racers and making new race fans. And that to me is what's super important in the motorcycling industry and for racing. And I support both of those super non-traditional paths to get people to the stands and watch some awesome American motorcycle racing. Well, that would be about it for today's show. Let's go ahead and wrap this guy up. It was super exciting. We covered the MotoGP. We bid farewell to Wes Cooley, a great, iconic American racer. We chatted a little bit of Moto Beach Classic and hooligan racing. And is it racing? Isn't it racing? Who knows? But it's awesome. You should be paying attention to it. You should also be paying attention to all of our shows every single week here on the Motorcycle and Powersports News Network and channel. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching On the Throttle, Jacqui and Josh.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you.